Good morning. Welcome to Books at the Bottom of the Stairs. My name's Lorene. It's February. It's kind of cold out, but it's beautifully sunny, and it's kind of. I have a love-hate relationship with this time of year. I generally really like the weather. I like the snow. I don't go out in it, but I like looking at it. I'd rather look at the snow than dark brown dead grass. But I tend to head into a bit of a slump this time of year. But luckily for me, it hasn't been a reading slump, which I've noticed a definite relationship between reading slumps and emotional slumps. And having noticed that does not necessarily mean that I can rescue myself, because I'll have a pile of books here. I'm going to have quite a few books sitting here, and I don't always love what I'm reading. So yeah, and I'm not a big rereader, so I don't really have the antidote. But I think I told you guys about how we were in Windsor and we had picked up a bunch of books at I think it's Raven's bookstore in Windsor, Nova Scotia, and there was a rack of Pierre Berton hardcovers, big guys. And I had made a choice to pick up The Great Depression. I'd been thinking about reading it anyways, but I'm not purchasing it. I thought I'll get it from the library and work my way through it. But there, lo and behold, it was. And so I got it. I was mesmerized by this book. It engaged me fully. I think, what did I do? I came up with a different sleep pattern plan. Steve helped me figure this out. That reading nonfiction at bedtime is actually better for me than listening to an audiobook or reading a fiction book. I sort of dwell a little bit on what I've read, but it's not like, where's the story going? What did that character do? And so on. I get into a different kind of thinking space. So I read about between 5 and 10 pages an evening, and turn off the light, and that worked a bit better. But some chapters in here took me so much I was so interested that I just would read, the full 30 pages or something. So this book is an examination of Canada during the Great Depression. It doesn't reflect too much on what's happening south of the border. There are some moments where what's happening, there's a president that's in office before Roosevelt, don't remember his name, as we get into the Great Depression, and then Roosevelt sees the Great Depression out. So one of the things that happens midway through the book is Canada starts to reflect on the US's more successful exit to the Great Depression than our own. Well, we had two prime ministers, one conservative and one liberal, that were dickheads. I don't really see that voting one in and one out really made a substantive difference. They both were of the era where the budget needed to be balanced at all costs, to the point where people died, because people were starving. So they had no compassion for that. They had this mindset that if you really wanted to, you get a job, you buy your food, you feed your family. Never mind that as the Depression is going on, wages are going down, down, down. We've got a situation where prior to the Depression, I would say, now, one of the things this doesn't do terrifically well, maybe that's a lie. I have a bit of trouble holding some of the statistics in my head, but it seemed to me that a waitress in the U.S., and this is before I think there was a huge disparity between the U.S. and Canadian dollar, was earning about $8 an hour. By the time the end of the Depression worked its way through Canada, there were people who were doing 14 and 16-hour days for $1.35. Like if you couldn't live on $1.35 before the Depression, how could you possibly afterwards? And the federal government refused to take responsibility until I think the late 30s. There was some money that went to the provinces, and the provinces were supposed to disperse it to the municipalities. But the municipalities are losing people because they're migrating out of the desperate zones. So Middle Canada and Western Canada really taking the worst of it. Ontario, it kind of depended a little bit on your location and what your mode of making a living was. And it also depended a little bit on how big your family was. Now, the sort of draconian rules about getting any kind of assistance were just as intense in Ontario. But so that's one thing I didn't exactly get a handle on is I don't love charts, but every once in a while a chart really can make, clarify things. So I'm not really sure if like Middle Canada was at the peak of the worst of it, and Ontario was kind of here, and BC was kind of here. That's the sense I got, but I didn't sit down and write down any statistics. So that was one piece that I was a little muddled on. The book starts out primarily as kind of a cultural history of what the people were experiencing as the Depression is coming in. And we know that it's both a financial one and an environmentally driven one with the drought and the sandstorms and the loss of topsoil in the prairies. And of course, the drought leads to diminishing water table. The water table means that there's got to be fewer cattle or crops. Some of the farmers switched from crops to cattle. I don't know why you would do that. It doesn't seem to me like a clever plan. I'm just guessing that a cow drinks more water per animal than an acre. I think that, I don't know, I'm just making that up. As we get to the end of it, we have seen pretty much the human cost of the whole Depression, but as the unions start to come into play, Pierre Berton becomes much more interested in what the unions were doing and what the political repercussions were in each of the different provinces and some cities. And so it sort of makes a bit of a shift about 3/4 of the way through. And I think that's okay because at a certain point, the human suffering cannot really be described any further. But why are all these people suffering is just, for me, an overarching question. What did the prime ministers were Bennett, Robert E. Bennett and Lyon Mackenzie King. More worried about their political skin, more worried about balancing the budget, more worried about their sort of little enclave in Ottawa, even though they sometimes would visit the prairies or what have you. They were still in their bubble. They had no concept. I don't think they ever went to a farm to see how a farmer was living, or went down into where families were starving. I don't think they ever stood in a food line, that kind of a thing. So the part that I didn't get in all of Bennett's and Mackenzie King's rhetoric was, what were they so concerned about in their budget? What were they paying for? Because this is all pre things like universal education, universal health care. The Cross-Canada Railway is still in its infancy. We're still struggling to get a Cross-Canada postal service. Like, all these things are in their youth, and in some cases just barely off the ground. Now, I think that those two prime ministers were responsible for either initiating or finalizing some of these cross-Canada things. CBC comes into play somewhere around there. But those are sort of intellectually not for the people. They're still about economies of inputs, outputs, bottom lines, red lines, black lines, that kind of thing. And they still see things like CBC as not so much something for the people listening, but for the advertisers who are making payments to the radio stations that would then become a revenue source for Ottawa. So So the rhetoric is still very much about, what's in it for Ottawa. Mackenzie King at a certain point just has no choice but to give some money to the provinces to help out with feeding people. There were no clothes allowances. People were in shreds of clothing. They patched clothing with feed sacks. Now, I don't mean those cute little feed sacks from the that you could buy your potatoes in, that were all calico. No, potato sacks. So people didn't have shoes. There would be children who would be going to, like if there were two girls in a family, one girl would go one day wearing the dress and the other girl would go the next day wearing the dress. And the girl who wasn't in the dress was sitting at home in her underpants or underclothes or her nightie or her mom's sweater. It's just like the poverty. I don't know if you ever remember, from those of us of my age, how we would see the children in Biafra eat all your food, or the children in Biafra will, think about them. There were children in Canada who looked like those children in Biafra. They had the swollen stomachs, they were in bones, they died of malnutrition, they died of associated disease related to malnutrition, they died of starvation. And so did the elderly, and it was just horrific. So when Bennett eventually changed his tune, because he was forced to, because it was a minority government, he had to make some concessions. He gave such a pittance. And the rules to get your relief money were you had to be in a location for 1 year before you could get your relief money. I could go on about this book for an entire hour. There was so much in it that was so interesting and explained so much about where we are today. And one of the kind of horrifying things is that when you look at Bennett and King, we see Mr. Shenanigans down south, and they're not that different. And the fascism that was in the 30s, it's just really not that different than what is trying to emerge out of the States. And hopefully for our own country, we manage to just remain sane. I know it can be a challenge at times, but yeah. Anyways, it was good. Pierre Berton is an excellent author. He can really bring any of his stories into the human domain, his nonfiction writing. And one of the things that he does, I talked about tuberculosis in John Green last session, and John Green wraps his nonfiction around human experience, and Pierre Berton does that for sure, and he predates John Green for doing that. And a number of nonfiction authors have taken that on, but what John Green and Pierre Berton do, which I think is okay, is they wrap it about the humans that are part of their research, not about themselves. We don't see them, staying at the Waldorf and having lobster dinner while they're doing their research. They are talking about the people who are experiencing tuberculosis or famine. So, I recommend this. Now, I've read The Klondike, and I remember it being good. He's got so many books that he has written all over the place, different kinds of topics. There's one about the railway. There's stuff about the Arctic. There's stuff from his travels as a columnist. So there's the film industry in Canada. So he has a huge number of books that you can look for. And I believe that there is a biography out there, not recent, but that also is very, very good. So I think he's one of our great writers. He was recognized as such while he was alive, but I think, I don't think he's dated. I think he's really bang on in the kind of work that he's done, and new things have happened. So now we want to know from the 30s to the 25s. But if you know what I'm saying. There's new research, and it's good. Okay, the next book I read, which was a bit of a disappointment to me. It's the second book in the duology. The first book was Heart of Iron, and this one, Soul of Stars by Ashley Poston. Oh, sorry. There we go. No glare? No glare? I was just sad. It really, I read it because I wanted to get to the end. I thought it was going to be written from the point of view of the hero turns into the evil guy. And I thought we were going to get it from his perspective and just what made him the evil guy and his struggle against what he knows to be right, against what's manipulating him to be the evil guy. I thought we were going to be in that point of view. We continue to be in a lot of other people's points of view. And it does one of the things that I do not like in an adventure story, where there's a lot of traveling and there doesn't seem to be any time between, location 1 and location 2. It just somehow all of a sudden things happen in an afternoon and I'm like, wait a minute, you just crossed the galaxy from one planet to the other. That surely is longer than a subway ride. So the time piece just doesn't make any sense for me. And also every time they get to a new location, there's another kind of altercation and nobody ever seems, I don't know, people just seem to get out of these scrapes that seem impossible. And so there's a little bit too much good luck. There's a little bit too much serendipity. There's a little bit too much a spacecraft kind of being in the right space when you jump off the balcony. Oh yeah, ooh, I dropped. Disappointed, really disappointed. However, the first book was really good. Read it as a standalone. All right. Okay. Another bummer. If you like Jane Austen, you might like this book. If you really like the facts around Jane Austen's life and her family and her extended family, you might like this book. If you like a book that the author has taken all these sort of expectations about how the Austens would have lived their lives in a really small kind of a way, very small unit kind of a way, you'll like this book. There is nothing inaccurate in this book. This person who did the art research is a brilliant Jane Austen academic. It's not an academic book. I mean, she's generally, her writing style is not going to kill you from an academic point of view, but there is almost no action. There's almost no real depth to any of the characters. It was part of my, I should show you the cover. I did go to a book talk because my friend Jill McLean was also book talking at the same event, and they, Susan Emsley and Jill McLean were sort of had read each other's books and were talking about each other's books, which made for an interesting event. But, yeah. So because of that, myself and 2 other of Jill's friends who happened to be in the same book club had attended this book event. And so we were, oh, Jill, go, Jill. And Sarah, is this, And as I was purchasing the book, because I'm trying to be supportive of local authors and so on, I thought, I just have a bad feeling. Yeah, I think that's all I'm going to say. It's a local book. It's Canadian. There is nothing wrong with the facts about this book. But as one of the people at the book club said about it, there's no imagination. There is no imagination. So that was sad. It is a challenge when you're supporting local authors. I'm a local author. I'll never get past Halifax. I'll never be more than, famous with my family. But it does make it hard when you're trying to find good quality in local authors because you want to be supportive and stuff. And yeah, sometimes it just doesn't go that way. I understand that Sarah's other books that are more on the nonfiction side are also excellent. Very, very well researched and very well presented. Okay, I do have 2 good books. Thank you. I just finished reading Kevin Sand's Children of the Fox, a Thieves and Shadow novel. This is a fun book. This is a real adventure book. We've got 5 children who each have different skills in the underworld, shall we say. They're all thief adjacent, and they're all under the age of 16. They've been brought together to break into a wizard's home and get something called the Eye. And there's very little time. They don't have a ton of research time. There's not a lot of opportunity for casing the joint out, that sort of thing. So they've agreed to do this because there's something like $3 million in the offering to be split between the 5 of them. So this looks great, but the leader of the pack, what's his name? Callan. He's a con artist. He's really good at it. So he's really good at the figuring out who needs to be where and what's the storyline going to be and how we're going to, pull it off, who needs to hand off the goods and who's got the escape vehicle, all that kind. None of that happens, but that's what he's good at. So they managed to break into this wizard's place, and the breaking out is pretty wild. There's all kinds of consequences to the whole thing. I'm not going to say whether they were successful or not, because either way would have had consequences. And we see some failures along the way, and then the way the kids kind of pick themselves up and becomes found family. And Kellen, who's the eldest and probably the most sensitive, in the sense that he, the other kids who find themselves abandoned by parents and other adults and so forth, these other 4 are a little more blasé about it. They've just kind of moved on emotionally, whereas Callan is still pretty traumatized by each of the abandonments he's experienced along the way. So we see into his heart more than we see into the others, although we do get good pictures of their backgrounds and what's motivating them currently. But he doesn't entirely trust these other kids because he's not ever had anyone that he could trust. So we've got that kind of found family dynamic happening. I really enjoyed it, and before I was even finished, I went to the library and got the next 2. So they're sitting there for February and end of beginning of March to do the reading. And yeah, I love an adventure that rips along. I'm sure that if I thought about it, which I'm not going to, there are a few problems with this. But sometimes you just got to go with the flow. Because there was nothing glaring. There was nothing really upsetting about choices that the author had made. I was happy with this author. Now, Kevin Sands has got another series, the Blackthorn Key series, which I'm pretty sure that's the reason I returned to Kevin Sands. This author is on my authors to keep following list. And, he's also Canadian. Woohoo! Yeah, so the Blackthorn Key one, I'm 100% sure that I've read a lot of it. And I think it goes a little bit longer than this series does, maybe 5 books. Anyways, yeah, terrific. It is for middle readers, but as I say, there's if you really like adventure stories, doesn't matter how old you are. So that was super duper. Now this one I just finished last night, and what a railroad ride. That's not what I want to say. What a roller coaster. It's, there's locked room mysteries. This is a locked boat mystery. It's a Voyage of the Damned. They're all on a schooner like this. This schooner is empowered by the Emperor, so through magic. And this fish represents one of the characters. Each of the characters is connected to a different part of geography of the island. Each island of the country. Each country has its own animal totem, and the children of who's ever in charge, one of their children will receive a magic blessing. It won't be the same as their parents. It will be a blessing that's more in tune with what each child needs to become the next leader. So once the child comes of age, the leader is still the leader, but has lost their magical parts to their child. So the adult is still in the government, but the child is the magical leader, I guess you could say. I'm really condensing this down. So the emperor is coming to his death, and his magic will transfer to his daughter. And so all of the 12 countries come together on this boat because the idea is team building. Yeah, that's the only part I had a little bit of trouble with, was they're on this boat. They're supposed to get together in order to be able to support each other as they are aging into their adulthood. So one of the kids is 30, he's not really young at all. Another one is 6 years old, but their elders still are in the picture. Once the emperor dies, these people will sort of move up a little bit higher in their each individual governments, but what they do is they come together in summits in order to represent their province. So this team building boat event starts with a murder, and it just goes from there. Who's being murdered, but why are they being murdered? It doesn't make any sense. And of course it's a closed murder scenario, so it's got to be one of the other 11. First of all, they got to figure out whether there's a stowaway, so it's got to be one of the other 11. So we get this attrition, and at a certain point, as I'm reading through it, I'm thinking, are there only going to be 2 left? Then how are we going to... The murderer can't kill the other guy, because then they would be blamed for the murder. So there's got to be a few left over. So it's a murder solving dilemma. And the first one, his name is Ganymedes, but his nickname is D. And he comes from the fish province. So that's why there's the fish on the front. The emperor comes from dragon province, and the dragon represents him or her. And Ganymedes, D, has not come into his magic for some reason. And so he's embarrassed. He's lying and hiding this and all along. He lied to the emperor about it, and his dad and him are trying to keep this all secret, that he hasn't stepped into his magic. And on board this ship, he doesn't have anything to support. Like, he doesn't have a defense magic, and he doesn't have an offensive magic either. So there's not any, he's got to just go through on his wits. And he is a smartass. And he has so little respect for some of these traditions, because he sees beyond the masks. He sees beyond the glitter. He's someone who, maybe he's Dutch. He just, like, this is bullshit, and he just calls bullshit. And so I really like him as a character. One of his best buddies is a little 6-year-old named Grasshopper. She comes from the, what's her actual, yeah, I think it's a grasshopper. She comes from that world, which is a crazy world of sort of desert-ish, savannah-ish, I guess, landscapes. And it's, some of these provinces have got death very close to their lifestyles, and others have got mining. And so she's very much like a grasshopper, and her magic is that she can go invisible. And so she's a fun little character, and she loves sweets. And so there's all these plays, all these fun things that happen according to people's personality, their desires, their wishful thinking sometimes. And then the servants are these little dragons who can do whatever you ask them to do. And D makes the mistake of saying to his dragon, if anybody comes into my room, I'd like you to let me know immediately. And the dragon says, how would you like me to notify you? Because, it's supposed to be secret. Just come and tell me if someone's come into my room, but don't tell anybody else. And so the dragon says to him, well, how would you like to do that? And D gets sarcastic and goes, well, just hit me with a fish. So this dragon, there's there's fun stuff all over the place like that. And it's quite a well-paced murder situation, and hiding from the murderer and seeking out the murderer, and just, yeah, it's got that tension back and forth. And I had two people that I had picked as the fairly early in the book, and so I thought I wasn't really based on evidence. It was more based on personalities, and I thought, oh, I think it might be one of those two. And then as the book progresses, I'm thinking, okay, that doesn't make sense anymore. I think it might be those two. One of them stayed the same, and one of them changed. And yeah, I didn't get it. Did not get it. So yeah, it's another reason why I think it's a good book. So that's 30 minutes for me, and that's everything I've read. I will see you next week with something else from this long pile. And I hope all your reading dreams and adventures continue to come true. Bye-bye for now.